Detroit, Michigan. Situated along the river lies the birthplace of Hockey Town, a tradition and way of life unparalleled in professional sports, where retired numbers and championship banners remind us of legends and 11 Stanley Cups, where local kids follow their dreams and play for their home team, and where stars are born by developing from within. A culture that breeds success from every level. Where faithful fans cheer loud and proud and fill the stands game after game after game, to see their team continue the winning tradition and take home the ultimate crown. This is where today's legends lead the way for tomorrow's stars.
It's a big honor for me to introduce to you Mr. Yuri Fishel, which is Director of Players Development for Detroit Red Wings and former player, Stanley Cup champion and world champions. Please, Yuri.
So, first I would like to acknowledge obviously my friends in Czech, so no disrespect to the English speaking. When I was given the opportunity to be here today, there's a reason why I chose English. Most of my work is in English, obviously. Our organization is in English, and then we can maybe later on replicate the same presentation in Czech if needed throughout the federation presentations that they're going to be. Takže zdravím všechny kamarády Čechy.
To all my friends, the Czechs, hello, it's nice to see you all here. I'm really looking forward to this. The reason why my presentation is going to be given in English is because I do my work in English and mostly work with players in English, and most of the videos, or all the videos actually going to be in English. So I'm really excited to be here. It's really great to be back in the Czech Republic for the World Championships, and let's get down to work.
This is the summary of what we're going to talk about today, and the culture of Detroit, I believe, has been tried to be copied for one reason. There's been success for numerous years. However, we understand that there is a process that needs to happen, and the process is what made the team successful before, but now we're just about on the crossroads. Do we stay good? We made the playoffs for the 24th time continuous, but we got eliminated in the first round of the playoffs by Tampa Bay Lightning in Game 7. Do we stay good? How do we become great again? The reinvention of the culture that's been happening in Detroit has been for the last 3 decades. In the 1980s, Jim Devellano came in, drafting was the idea. They had one of the best lines in hockey. In the 90s, the Russian Five were established. Stanley Cups came in the 2000s. It was a culture change where Steve Yzerman retired, and then new players took over, Zetterberg and Datsyuk. And reinvention of the culture is what we believe in. Nobody that stays competitive for a long time does the same thing over and over and over again. It starts with the culture. We're going to talk about the big picture evaluations, how to work with the players from my perspective, which I always focus on the big picture. Mental game is going to be a big part of the big picture, and we're going to tap into that. Now, you're going to hear me say terms as elephant and rider. We're going to show a monkey study, so there's going to be a lot of animals in the presentation. However, it's scientific based, and the rider and the elephant is a metaphor which helps me to understand each player, why they are the way they are emotionally, and what maybe will help to satisfy their needs so they can perform at the highest level. With the culture, it always starts with passionate people, and I'm going to talk about passion a little bit later, but Ken Holland is all about passion. He's the most passionate guy in hockey on the management side. He's been, since 1997, the general manager of the Detroit Red Wings, the only one that's never missed the playoffs, won 3 Stanley Cups in the meantime as a general manager. He's all about passion. The philosophy is when you have passion, and that's the internal drive that just keeps on going all the time, when you get humbled, you'll do something about it. It's simple as that. When passionate people get humbled, they don't want to be humbled again. Everybody that Ken Holland hires, he hires passionate people. He gives them a job, you go do your job, make sure you do it right. And then he leaves us alone. He oversees the whole umbrella, and I'm going to talk about his leadership too. Stability and urgency, there's always a balance. I see a lot in Europe here, coaches are rotating on daily, weekly, monthly basis. One guy's in, while this guy kind of lost the voice in the room, and on and on and on. Lots of rotation, lots of instability. It's starting to happen in the United States too. In the NHL, coaches used to endure longer periods of time. Now it's turning into where the NHL system is based on you fail, you get a higher seed at the draft, potentially prone to getting a better player, more talented, that can make your organization better. But at the same time, it gave the perception to the owners that we can win within 3 years. The long-term building process used to be for a decade. Now, within 2-3 years, getting 2-3 key players through the draft, the parity doesn't allow all the teams keep their players within their structure of the salary cap. There was a little bit of a movement where now players are signed to long-term contracts. They all have to fit under a cap. And then the stability that Ken Holland provides is you have passion, you got humbled, a reset, let's move on, let's get better again, and keep in a low profile. The philosophy there is don't give reasons for people to put you down when you're failing. Examples are, there's flamboyant leaders. They like to be in front of people. They say they get the job, and all within 3 years we're going to be competing for a championship, and within 5 years we're going to be going for our 2nd Stanley Cup, and on it we're going to change this thing. It's going to be great. We're going to make bold moves. Those guys are out of business within 3 to 5 years. It's a long-term process. When Steve Yzerman was introduced as a general manager of the Tampa Bay Lightning, he said, this is the things we're going to do. It's going to be a long-term process. He didn't put any big expectations on himself under the radar. Media is a wonderful tool to promote. If there is success, they will catch on. They'll promote the success all day long. The problem when somebody is putting all these external expectations on themselves, the media will come back in a time of slump and will remind them, well, what's going on? It creates unnecessary pressure, and the pressure management we're going to talk about towards the end, that the affirmations, we're going to be great soon, and we're going to make these bold moves, it always fizzles out. Humble, low profile. Most people wouldn't recognize what Ken Holland looks like, and he happens to be the most successful general manager maybe in the history of the NHL. Never missed the playoffs for 17 continuous years. He is the guy on the left, that's our captain, Henrik Zetterberg, and Mike Babcock, most passionate coach that I've come across, right next to Scotty Bowman, that also happened to be part of our culture. Creating the competition within, it's depth, depth, depth. The more players that can compete for the 23-man roster we have, the better it is in a time of crisis with obviously lots of injuries or when somebody's not playing well. If we have players in the minor league systems that are as good as NHLers on other teams, the top 2-3 guys obviously, now we know we can replenish on the go. They come up when somebody gets hurt and we're not missing a beat. Creating expectations, that's all from within. Media will create expectations from the outside. Social media now is so prevalent that people are creating expectations on organizations based on the moves that they have made. Hiring people, getting players through the draft. We create expectations from within. Every meeting we have, Ken Holland walks in, we have scouting meetings. How do we get better? How do we get better? We've been good. How do we get great again? Let's not get sloppy. Let's not get fat. Let's not get happy. How do we get better all the time? The passion from within the organization is something that certainly is very motivating for anybody to be part of. Managing the pressure, low profile will limit the amount of pressure that happens in the slump. It's very, very important. And then winning is one thing that keeps us in business. Simple as that. We don't win in North America, we're out of business. We don't win in Europe, most likely we're out of business. Winning is what keeps us employed. Jim DeVillano, who started the whole ideology of Detroit Red Wings in the 1980s, he had his ABCs. Know your business, work your butt off, and get along with people. And getting along with people is what keeps somebody employed during the time of crisis. There's times that people underperform. People, no robots. That happens all the time. Get along with people, especially when you're successful. A lot of people like to point out how successful they are. It's completely the opposite when it comes to slump management, and we're going to talk about that quite a bit at the end. Low profile, especially in the times of success, will help when the wave of slump will come in. Last summer, we had a very interesting point in our organization, and we had a culture reset. The culture reset was in 2013, Jim Nill, who was the general manager of the Canadian national team here, he left, took a couple scouts with him. We hired new scouts, and we hired new strength coach for the first time in the organization, and full-time nutritionist. Now there's been established staff for 20 years, lots of stability in Detroit, winning kept us all employed, and now new people came in. There's always friction, no matter what. People like change when they choose to. People are resistant to change when it's forced upon them. On the old staff, now everybody started to be a little protective of their own environment. A little tension started. Old staff versus new staff, but also what we had, there's too many options out there. Every player, they're making so much money now, and there's so many options that they want this best personal therapist, and they want this guy, and they want this acupuncturist, and they want to go see this masseuse, and now the oversight from our PT department, the physiotherapist who is in charge of the rehab part of it, now we have players leaving the locker room left and right, and they were paying for their treatments. Well, now we didn't really oversee what was going on, and now when something happens bad, when everything goes fine, great, do it. When something happens bad, we need to know what's going on, because that's the only way to fix it. Understand before it happens. And the same way, I'm going to talk about the mental part, understanding things before slumps happen, so we can manage the slumps a little bit better. So Ken Holland, what he did with all the friction, he called everybody out. Simple as that. It's the family approach that you're gonna sit down at the dinner table, gotta talk about it. You gotta settle down the differences, and you're the strength coach, you get along with the goalie coach. There was a friction between those two. They worked it out. Now they're a very respectful relationship. Same thing was with the physiotherapist department and all these external people that players wanted to use. Well, they got fixed. The same thing I got called out on that, well, what do we do with our players in the off season? Well, then I sat down and I presented, this is what we do, and this is why we're doing it. Okay, well, now everybody knows. The bottom line, when there's so many strong personalities hired, they're so passionate, in times of crisis, which is not winning as much, or when the change is forced upon, friction starts. And the family approach is always, you talk about respect, respect, respect. To me, the most important thing, and that's the low profile, is respect enough not to be disrespectful. That's all it is. This over submissive respect that people give sometimes, a lot of times it's fake, and certainly cannot maintain. Just don't be disrespectful. Everything's going to be okay when the slump comes. And improving relationships, it certainly will change the culture and will keep the organization going. Relationships within the passionate people of the organization is something that keeps us going here. The reinventing the culture, I talk about the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, it's an ongoing process. The self-evaluation is on a daily basis, external pressure, but mainly the internal expectations daily, reflecting on what's going on and reinventing the culture year after year after year to really see what everybody else is doing, especially the ones who turn average organization into a great one. And are we doing the same thing? Are we better? What are we doing? And with that, there's two organizations in Europe that I respect very much. One is Davos in a Swiss league, and one is Skellefteå in Sweden. For two reasons. They've endured to stay on top for just about a decade. Who doesn't watch the Swedish Elite League? Skellefteå has been in the finals for 5 times in a row. They lost twice, they won twice, and they just lost being the best team in the regular season this year. To be 5 times in the finals in today's hockey doesn't happen by accident. They know what they're doing, which obviously most of us don't. Their consistency has been very impressive, and I admire that. Same thing goes for Davos. They're routinely challenging for a championship. They also had a little bit of reset of their culture, but winning the championships in the Swiss League on a regular basis, I appreciate consistency. I think success, when it comes in big waves, as it does, it's the managing of highs, keep them as high as you can, but certainly try to prevent the lows, and when the lows happen, try to minimize the damage. This is the saying that we have inside of the locker room: to whom much is given, much is expected. Our job as an organization is we know that players, when they play to their potential, they are the ones that win the games. They're the ones that keep the rest of us employed. We try to set up an environment that doesn't create excuses. Well, the ice was no good, or the sharpening was no good, or, well, we didn't train, we were too tired. On and on. Excuse machines never survive in hockey. That's the typical trade that people may have when something is not perfect. Our job as an organization, we try to give much because we expect a lot from the players. No excuses. That's the team in setting up the environment. In the player development environment, I look at it as director of player development as an environmentalist. I started 8 years ago. I thought teaching the players, and we got to teach them this, and we got to teach them that, and we got to show them how to do this. It really is about managing the environment around the player. That is the relationship with the head coach. That is the relationship with the strength coach. That is the evaluators that are within maybe the amateur system around the players, managing the environment around the player. When player is growing up in a ghetto, it's very hard to undo all these habits. And that's where I really love this saying, you can take a boy out of a ghetto, but you can't take the ghetto out of a boy. When players grow up in an environment that doesn't teach right, we need to adjust that, try to influence it, so the player can get ahead of the curve. It's the reality where he's at. Let's get better. Make sure you don't have bad habits when you leave. The environments that we have, there's few rules that we have to follow. The environments are controlled and uncontrolled. Somewhere we have a complete control over what our players are doing. That's obviously in Detroit, Grand Rapids, our AHL affiliate, and Toledo, also our primary affiliate in the East Coast Hockey League. But uncontrolled, this is where I believe the jump-starting, the pro development process is so vital. in Canadian Junior, in NCAA, US Junior or Tier 2, and in Europe, same thing. It's the relationships that we would have with the organizations, the way we can influence our players before they get into our controlled environments. There are some rules we have to follow based on the CBA. The CBA today has got so many pages that it's thicker than the Bible. A few lawyers had a really good time with it, and certainly came up with rules that we have to follow for the players, the rights that we have to after we draft them. So CHL players, we have to sign within 2 years, otherwise we lose their rights at the draft. NCAA Europe, it's for 4 years. But also there's rules how we can treat players. And we can bring them at the end of the year, we call it black aces. Now, that's an experience that junior player may have at 18 years of age. We call them to our Grand Rapids system. They'll be around for 7-10 days, and they can get influenced by the culture that we have within Grand Rapids. Same thing happens when Grand Rapids gets eliminated in the playoffs. We happen to be still in the playoffs in Detroit. We bring up some of the top players into Detroit so they can really experience the culture there. We cannot subsidize anything in the off season. I cannot tell a player, hey, go get this trainer, I'm gonna pay for him, and you just train with him for the rest of the year. That's illegal. The European system is based on obviously having off season as a team together. Now it's branching off into having partly some guys on individuals and some guys are training as a team, but we cannot subsidize anything in the off season. There is fines, there is limitations within the CBA. The same goes, we only have 7 days to control. However, we split up the 7 days. You're gonna come in for 1 day, this is what we're gonna do with you. Next month you're coming in for 1 day, that's what we're gonna do with you. That's one way to do it. Most teams went to the model that they have their development camp. It's 7 days of controlled environment that we have in the off season. That's really the only introduction for players that are playing in USHL and Tier 2. They're going to college, and for NCAA players that we can introduce our culture to them. So we bring them in, it's in Traverse City. We're gonna hear a little bit about that from our leader, Ken Holland. And maximum we can make our players, that's changed. There used to be a player that gets drafted out of USHL. There's 1 year he plays in USHL after the draft, then he goes to college. He spends 3-4 years in college. He happens to sign a contract. He turns pro. He would go to development camp every year. Agents started to not like that idea that much. It's too much. Why? It's the same thing all the time. So NHL and HLPA decided that we can make our players go to a development camp mandatorily only 3 times. And it's for players that have less than 140 pro games under the entry-level contract. So now, this is when player gets into our organization because he's been drafted by the Detroit Red Wings. Behind the scenes of the draft of a player who was our first-round pick last year, Dylan Larkin. He's number 21 playing for the U.S. team. He's one of the youngest kids in the tournament here. This is what he went through last year. Let's play the video.
And the 2014 NHL draft belongs to the Detroit Red Wings.
The Detroit Red Wings selected the U.S. National Development Program in Ann Arbor, Michigan, Dylan Larkin.
Well, just think you spend your whole life doing something, and your family gets to be here with you today, and you feel your dreams coming true. What kids don't realize is it's just a day, and it just opens up doors and opportunity. Once you're drafted, and whether you're drafted first or whether you're drafted in the 7th round, now you're a Red Wing, and our job is to develop you.
Wow, sign autographs, so shaking. So it's exciting. How's it going? Good? How are you? I was pretty nervous, but just to hear your name is a relief. I mean, you never know like what teams actually want. You know, they question you at the combine, and they ask you what you can bring to a team, so you just have to give honest answers and try to do that and let them know what they're doing. Dude, I'm not like dragging with that shot off. That's pretty sick. Pedal jets and through that. Yeah. Yeah.
So here, what we have right here. This is going to be yours to go, okay?
Okay.
You're going to. This is where camp is. You're going to need to be there on the 3rd. Okay.
working out at it, doing whatever you can do to maximize the potential you've been given.
So now we've drafted a player. Congratulations, obviously, to Dylan to be a first-round pick for the Detroit Red Wings. We love to have him. He's a great kid. I really believe he's got a great future. However, there's going to be steps in order to get there, become a good pro, and stay a good pro. When players are playing away from the controlled environments of the Detroit Red Wings, there is still certain transferable skills that they need to have in order to be successful when they hit pro, when they hit the ground running. We try to jumpstart the pro mentality. It always starts from within. Promote self-evaluation, promote self-learning, and self-improvement. Those are three keys how players become successful and how they stay successful. In times of success, when things are going just okay, in the slump, same thing. It always starts with the player. There's pro traits that vary from a junior mentality, and junior, it's driven by being a kid. I'm a junior, I am tired, I need a break. Steve Yzerman said in 2001, in pro, you're tired, you work yourself out of being tired. The mentality has to change, and that also eliminates some excuses that may follow because of fatigue. Same thing is working out of slump. I'll talk about slumps in depth. Do your mistakes before you get to the NHL. There is so much scrutiny in the NHL with media, and now especially with people that are on social media networks, that they can stir and create a buzz about absolutely anything that could be fabricated or it could be true. As an example, we had a player in the American Hockey League, and this is kind of funny, sad story at the same time. It certainly, thank God, it happened in the American Hockey League. The team is having a rookie party. It happens to be during Halloween. So the rookies were forced by the friendly veterans to wear a costume and go out with the team. So one of our top prospects put on a Teletubbies costume, which is big, fuzzy looking ball, and he went to the bar. The problem in the United States, he wasn't 21. Then, night continues. He was driving home. He drove home. He was driving in a one-way street. Unfortunately, the opposite direction. He gets pulled over. He gets questioned. Obviously, he was under the influence. He was a Canadian. Now it's a whole legal issue that became, luckily got worked out. He understood, he fixed the issue, never did it again. If that happened at the NHL level, can you imagine the headlines around the world? That NHL player driving in a Teletubbies costume, drunk, one way in the opposite direction. Do your mistakes before the NHL. That's our mentality, and there's been a theme that we've kept our players in the minors longer. Well, there's reasons why. And everybody makes mistakes. In the NHL, everything is magnified. We call it overripe before you're to the NHL. When you are getting called up for the Detroit Red Wings as a player, unless there is a massive amount of injuries, you're getting called up because you're better than somebody else on our roster. You're gonna play, somebody's gonna sit, they may have to clear waivers in their one-way contract. At the NHL level, it's all about winning. If you can improve our team, you have a chance to play. When players are getting called up, you get called up and you stay in the NHL. There's lots of injuries. Obviously, somebody gets called up, they may have to be sent back down when everybody gets healthy and the players are better. Improve the NHL. And Pavel Datsyuk, he came as a young kid, young in the mind. He was 23 years old. 2001, 2002 season was his rookie year. And he got passed on in the draft twice. Nobody wanted him. We got the draft in one of the later rounds 2 years later in 1998. And we also put him right on the team. He never played in the minors. Well, he was overripe because he stayed in Russia until the time he was ready to come. He hit the ground running. He was never sent down to the minors. He was on one of the best teams assembled in the last 3 decades. Want it, do it, get it. Every time Pavel does something, he does it with purpose. It starts before he does it. He wants to get better. He's got the mentality that I want to be better than others, and I will figure it out. I will get into the teaching part a little bit later. He does it, and then the results come. Not all the time, but it's all about playing percentages. More you want it, more you try to do it, more likely you're going to succeed in getting it. Now this is Ken Holland speaking our development camp when first time introduction of the culture to our players. Let's play the video.
The Detroit Red Wing development camp, I really look at player development as two important times. The July, what we call the development camp, and the September, which is the Traverse City Prospect Tournament. The development camp is where we bring all our players who are not signed to contract, all our draft picks, players that we own, and anybody that's on an entry-level contract, they come into Traverse City for about 5 days. We bring in our strength coach, Peter Renzetti, we bring in our training staff, we bring in our nutritionist, we bring in our PR department, and we spend 5 days educating the young players on off-ice conditioning, on nutrition, on social, on dealing with the media. At the same time, it's an opportunity for the organization to get to know these players. We draft the players at the draft table. We bring them into Traverse City as a first-year pro, educate them, the importance of hitting the gym. Then they come to play in the Traverse City Prospect Tournament. Many of them go back and play junior. They come back a second year. We get them in the summertime, and then another prospect tournament. All the while, we're evaluating which ones we want to sign to a contract, which ones don't improve enough, and then as we make decisions, those that are signed, they might come back to the prospect tournament, the development camp for 1 or 2 more years, and again, they're now become the veterans at the summer development camp. We'll have a barbecue where we sit out and we try to get the kids comfortable. And Chris Chelios and some of the vets will talk a little bit about their careers, and you're really trying to create that Red Wing culture, to educate them about the Red Wing culture, what's expected of them, for them to one day play their way into being a Detroit Red Wing.
The summary of the development camp that we have, Ken Holland has talked about. Now, I would like to point out, we have 4 days, generally on ice, outside of the scrimmage day, that we have a chance to influence our players. I believe in daily theme. When I travel throughout the season and seeing our players in the uncontrolled environments, there needs to be a skill that they can work on, that we can teach them instead of teaching concepts, that there needs to be a skill they can work on throughout the year, wherever they are, in Europe, in juniors, in college, and come back and get better. So that's the transferable skills that we worked on last summer. This year is going to be low adjusted again. Nobody can hold up anymore, but you can still learn how to get in people's way, how to angle better, and how to bump with your speed being in front of a player. Same thing with the puck management, value the puck, that's our philosophy. What are you doing with the puck? Skating, taking space away on puck battles, where evaluation day to day, it starts with the development camp. But also, it's unfair to evaluate players halfway through the summer, because obviously all we care about is how great they're going to be pushing the team to get to the playoffs and how good they are in the playoffs. So we evaluate them camp to camp. So I focus on the big picture evaluations also in the off season. Now players went home, and this is what I believe is very important. I'll ask the players, how competitive are you? Well, I say, well, I compete quite a bit. Well, Okay, well, you're in the group. Rank yourself how competitive you are within the group. So they'll say, well, we have 15 players, well, maybe 5. Okay, great. How dedicated are you versus to the group that you're working? And how athletic, how good of an athlete are you within the group? All those are important, and now it's not teaching the player what he needs to do, but it's teaching exactly the drill, but it's teaching the player, how do I become more competitive? Compete, passion. I heard yesterday about will in Mr. Houlier's presentation. I believe will is a skill, and that's very, very important. People talk about skills, and will and determination is one of the most important skills that we have that we also need to improve upon. So now, how did you improve versus the group, and how were your results? Those are all important questions that I'll have for the players. And the environment, now my job comes in, I travel in the off season, and I'll spend a day training with the player. I'll be around for a couple days, and I'll see what the groups are about. Now I can compare. And when player puts himself, sizes himself up within the group, are there any NHLers? Are there any pros? What are the guys doing? How hard are they pushing? Well, I put it in perspective for them. Well, you're not working your group is not as competitive as the group in Edmonton. And that group in Edmonton is not even as competitive as the one in Montreal. Well, the Europeans are doing a way better job than this group does. So putting things in perspective for the player so they can get the idea what's going on. I'm going to show you how great I am. That's the mentality that every player needs to have. Get challenged, I'm going to show you. Now, big picture evaluations on the ice. Jim Hiller, who is one of our assistant coaches, he started a software company on analyzing players in the NHL. That happened when he was transitioning towards his off season in 2014, last summer, and he did this presentation to Mike Babcock. He happened to be hired by us. He spent a year with the Detroit Red Wings as an assistant coach. What do you do when you can make a play as a player? To me, people talk about this buzzword analytics. That is the most important thing. What do you do when you can make a play? Defensively, are you stopping the offense? Are you the one that disrupted the offense coming in? Did you stop the offense? Let's get past the skating and drills and making little plays. It's all about the big picture. Offensively, when you're making a play, you pass the puck to your teammate. Are you giving him enough time so he can make a play? To put it in perspective, if I have a puck behind the net and I pass it to Pavel Datsyuk, he doesn't need as much time to make a play. Well, if I pass it to a fourth-line player, I need to give him to a little bit earlier. It's all about the big picture. When I pass the puck, what happens with the puck, and can my teammate make a play? Just something to think about. And also, who is the one surprising the opposition, defensively and offensively? Transferable skill, when we work with the players on several different levels, there is juniors, there's East Coast Hockey League, there's American Hockey League, there is the NHL. While you may be a good skater in junior, while your technique may limit you at the American League level. You may be a scorer in American League, while you're not playing hard enough to fight for your scoring chances to be a scorer in the NHL. What is the transferable skill within the levels? And best players never get caught off guard. That's Dave Lewis, who happens to be the head coach of the Belarusian national team, who's doing extremely well in the Ostrava group. And he is one of my mentors. Best players don't get caught off guard. So everything we teach, how do we catch the opposition off guard? Because there's lots of good players in the NHL around us. Claude Julien happened to be a rookie head coach in juniors. He won the Memorial Cup, the ultimate trophy in juniors. It was very interesting that he worked on a big picture, long-term process. And the message is everybody has a habit that will start the dominoes of habits to improve. You stand in front of the net, you analyze, puck goes corner to corner, what do you do? Same thing happens on the blue line. Same thing happens in the neutral zone. Well, instead of analyzing, anticipate, get going as soon as the puck gets going. When you fix that in the D zone, it will improve retrieving pucks in the O zone. It will retrieve the pucks a lot quicker in the neutral zone for defensemen. What is the one habit? We need to help players understand, and obviously consistency of the coaches and the management sending the messages to the players. As an example, Ken Holland will come in to Grand Rapids. Ryan Martin, who is our assistant general manager, will come into Grand Rapids and watch our players. Well, in the meantime, Chris Chelios been there. And the message is that the players are getting what they need to work on, where they're at in their career. They're coming from the coaches. If Chris Chelios doesn't know what the coaches are telling to the player, well, he's come in and they just told him 5 minutes ago to the player in the coach's room, well, you need to work on this. And he comes in, oh, yeah, you just had a great game. Well, now Ken Holland comes in and, well, you got to work on something else. And there's too many people involved today in every organization. Hiring has been the trend in the last 2 decades. There's lots of messages coming from different places. So now the step-by-step that I believe work on one thing for a long period of time, and it's a long-term process. Example, you had 2 turnovers on the wall. You didn't get it out. Well, let's not just work on it twice. Let's work on it until the player gets it, until he gets better, and until he fixes the problem. Long-term process. Work on strengths as much as weaknesses. Everybody's got their uniqueness, and everybody's got their weak sides. It's very hard to bring the weaknesses to become elite. The idea is work on the weakness to become average and keep the uniqueness, because that's what's going to keep you at the NHL level. Don't give anybody excuses. Fix your weakness so it becomes an average. Nobody can pick on you anymore, but keep your uniqueness. If you're a scorer, you need to be a prolific scorer. Don't try to be somebody that you're not. Work on your strengths at the same time. There is a huge phenomenon in hockey today, a lot of ADD, HDD players, attention deficit players that have a hard time with concentration. And they have a hard time when you're working with them after practice. They have a hard time staying calm that, well, they want the instant reward. That's what ADD is all about, instant reward, instant reward. When you're working with ADD players, or low IQ, hockey IQ players, or mentally weak players, now they may not be able to handle working on 3 weaknesses at the same time. After practice, well, you're not good at forechecking, and you're not good at retrieving the pucks around the net, and you're not good at blocking shots in the D zone. Well, work on one thing at a time. There's a long block. It's all about getting into the playoffs and succeeding in the playoffs. There's several months to do that. Work smarter. People talk about work harder, work harder, work harder. Everybody works hard today. Everybody in this room works hard, some harder than others. The ones who work harder and smarter are the ones who are going to be successful. This is a message, and this is what I'm going to finish with, how we're doing time-wise. So this is a message that we have that every player needs to acquire this skill, and will is a skill. Let's play the video.
Okay, make sure you're here. Your road. So your road's different than your road's different than your road. Don't be concerned about where somebody else is at. Make sure you're concerned about what it takes for you on your path to get to the NHL. What is your path and what do you have to do if you want it enough, if you have the talent enough? What is your path to make sure, one, you get there? Well, let's not just concentrate on getting there. What about being a star when you're there? What about playing for 20 years? What about having that be a long-term occupation for you? Because somebody's getting passed and somebody's passing somebody. I guarantee it, as I watch this in 3 years. If you think you're entitled to something, you're in the wrong business. If you guys sit in here and you take an attitude in life where you're entitled to success, I'm going to tell you right now, you're in the wrong business for sure. Do you have the inner drive to show up every single day even when you don't feel good? I'm a huge believer that greatness is a daily choice. Every single day you wake up and you either take a couple steps towards being great or you take a couple steps away from being great. Every single day. every single day. There's guys in this room right now who are listening and are saying, you know what, he's probably got a point. Did I get up and outwork all the guys in this camp today? You earn what you get in life. You wake up every morning, you take steps towards greatness, or you don't. Period.
Entitlement is cancer of development. Any player that gets entitled, they think they're good, is going to stop progressing as much as somebody else who is absolutely hungry. Entitlement, we need to get it out of our players' minds. They can progress the way we want, what's best for them, and hopefully they'll all keep us employed. Thank you very much.
Jirka, I would like to ask you, there is a big shift in players being selected from NCAA versus major junior. How do you see as an advantage ACA is providing to the players, and how you see the situation?
There are several environments, obviously, when I talk about Europe Junior in Canada and NCAA, I believe it's very individual. And for NCAA, I have two boys. I would certainly recommend they both play hockey. If you're not a top prospect that you believe you're going to be in the NHL or in the American Hockey League at age of 19, 20, and have a chance to succeed, that's very important. Not just be there, but have a chance to succeed. Go the longer route, stay in Europe longer, or go to NCAA route, which is going to prep schools, going to Tier 2, go into USHL, and then have 4 years of extra development. I certainly recommend it always for players who are just maybe finishing off their puberty and they're 20 years old. Well, you're going to be battling against guys who are growing hair on their chest at age of 15 in juniors, and you're probably going to get banged up. Are you ready to be successful? And that's what I mean about overripe. So when we have overripe players, even at these youth levels, are they overripe that they can stay within the environment and be successful? So to your point, absolutely, if you're immature and you don't hate school, which is a huge differentiator for a lot of the players, some guys that focus with managing their lifestyle, go to school, have extra 4 years of development, finish playing amateur hockey basically at age of 24, because there is so many 20-year-old freshmen in hockey now, and now you're mature, your body is ready, mentally you're ready, you can handle the pro level. There is others. Why should Connor McDavid go to college? He's gonna, next year, he's gonna play in the NHL somewhere. I'm watching Jack Eichel a couple days ago in Ostrava. He is in college. He's an 18-year-old guy. There are two top prospects right now in the world. Big buzz, who's gonna be number one? One is in college, the other one is not. Jack Eichel is not gonna graduate on time. I don't think that's gonna happen. He's gonna play pro sooner or later within the 4 years that he should stay in school and finish his degrees. Is it gonna be next year or is it gonna be a year later? Who knows? But it's very individual choice. It should come from the parent. Is my kid ready enough? It should come observing the kid. Is he ready to be successful in college? If he's immature, go to college.
Thank you. I think it has a lot to do with ability of, like, Detroit is so successful by bringing average players to become very special. Do you have any special formula to share with?
Absolutely. I actually had 25 more slides, how we do it, and we just didn't get to it. So, it starts with when we hear about attitude. Anybody wants to see more slides? Or is it a lunch hour and let's go have some lunch? I'm asking.
Well, thank you.
This is for you. So there's two guys that want to watch more slides and the rest wants to eat? Okay. So if I can ask the guys to help me out in the back to get to the slide without explaining how the brain works. There is, obviously, science has explained us where passion comes from in the brain. So there is a slide that's all black and has 3 images of brain on an MRI. It's towards the back. Can we put that on? Please. Yes. So this is an MRI image of where our motivation happens in the brain. When we get motivated, there are certain areas that get triggered more than others inside of our brain. Well, that happens to be our emotional brain that, in a metaphor, you can call it an elephant that's super strong, that drives us all the time. To managing the area of our emotions is channeling it the right way. Can we put the slide on that has mental toughness on it? It has a picture of Nick Lidstrom and mental toughness. That's still explaining the brain, and mental toughness has Nicholas Lidstrom on it. So while this is on, our neocortex, which is the outside part of the brain, that can be described as a rider. The strong passion center of our emotions is the limbic brain. That's where the strong elephant of our emotion is. It's explained as an elephant, as a metaphor, for the reason because it's very hard to control at certain times. It's very hard to control in the times of success, and it's very hard to control in the slumps. A lot of times, players' actions get overridden by the emotional, passionate drive that they haven't learned to harness. And they start acting out, or they get down, they get in slumps. You can picture it as rider of an elephant, where the rider becomes a driver and trains the elephant and channels it the right way, then good things will obviously happen. Can we put the mental toughness slide on? Okay, I'll try to fast forward into these. In today's hockey, I believe, at the pro level, are major differentiators in guys' progress. When we're raising kids, there is so much information: how to train players off ice, how to teach skill, how to teach power skating, how to help them with all the problems we have. Us as coaches, I have a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old, us as coaches are creating a beast that's also forgetting how to learn themselves. Pill for everything society, that's a metaphor in the United States. In coaching, it turned into drill for everything society. There is always a drill to fix a problem. The biggest issue is when kids are not learning how to fix their own problems because he cannot shoot. Okay, well then dad will dish out a few dollars and we'll send him to a shooting coach. Well, he's got a hard time skating. Well, he'll send him to a skating coach. Well, he's got a hard time battling. He'll send him to a battle camp. Parents and youth coaches are creating this beast that's not being taught to learn themselves. The generation before the information age, which was communism here in Czech Republic, or 70s and 80s anywhere around the world, was all about you needed to figure it out in order to be better than the guy next to you, than somebody else. That's not like that today, because there's always somebody to go to that's an expert, and hockey is a big business, and a lot of people that are super smart and very educated made a great living in fixing little hockey pros' problems. So when they get to pro hockey, this is what mental toughness to me it's all about. It's fun to play hockey when we're young. Everything is fun. Everything is fun. Well, in pro hockey, it's military lifestyle schedule. You get up at this time, you make yourself a breakfast, that's very important. This is when you drive yourself to the rink, this is when you prepare yourself for practice, this is when you practice, this is when you cool down, this is when you rehab, this is when you go to have lunch, and on and on and on. Lots of players are still kids in their mind. It's very hard for them to handle a routine. Whoever can master handling routine is ahead of the game. Routine for people that like to have fun, which most athletes are, can be detrimental to their success. Another differentiator is chronic pain. When kids are little, they bounce back. They're made out of rubber and they get hit from behind, and okay, hopefully they won't get a concussion. But in pro hockey, there's chronic pain. They accumulate injuries, and I call it 1 injury a year. You play for 10 years, you've had your shoulder done twice, you had your knee done, you twisted your ankle, you broke your hand. It accumulates. Body remembers, it becomes a little bit frigid. It's hard to get going in the morning for some older players because they've experienced so many injuries and now they have chronic pain. Fatigue, when kids are little, the daily grind accumulates in pro hockey. You're sleeping on the bus, you're eating on the bus, you go home, and now maybe it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and are you getting your sleep? Are you flushing all the toxins that have been accumulated inside of your body? It's very important to understand that fatigue is a major differentiator in pro sports. Handling a player who is in a chronic fatigue state, he's not going to respond the same way as when he is fresh before the season starts. So it's very important, is the player chronically fatigued? Then, at young age, it's extremely easy to get better. It's very easy. The harder you work, the more you work on your skill, it will show. The more camps I send my 2 boys to, they're gonna get better. That's just the reality. Now, is it good for them in the long run? There's obviously a lot of talk about it in at all the symposiums. How much is enough? But bottom line, at young age, they get better. In pro hockey, the wall comes. At one point, they have a very hard time to get better because the harder they go to the gym, and they're already in a fatigue state, and they already have some chronic pain. Well, how is that beneficial? Like, is that working smart, or is it just being dumb and working harder because that's what somebody told me to do? It's figuring things out. And then when the progress wall comes, I can improve. Well, it may be simple as not being on the power play in pro hockey. There's players that have been on the power play for their whole careers because they've been prolific. Well, they get to pro hockey, and coach just doesn't put them on the power play. They may not have the transferable skill that I talk about, or they may simply just not good enough. There's somebody better on that particular team. It's very hard to handle if I am better than somebody else on a different team. He's on a worse team, he's on the power play, and I'm not. It's very hard, because the points come, and that will determine, obviously, the next contract, and on and on and on. Bottom line, in order to be in the NHL, is taking jobs, keeping jobs, in a way to be a little bit selfish about ourselves, perform the best I can in order to make the team the best they can possibly be. And another one is, that's also developed at early stages, is not being liked. I hear this all the time, coach doesn't like me. It's normal. That happens all the time. But it developed at early age. I grew up in communism as a little boy. Well, we had the same coach for a couple of years, then we had the same coach for a couple of years, then we had the same coach for a couple of years, and then I left for North America. Well, now, on my son's team, he's in the summer league, he's in the spring league, he's in the fall league. It's not unusual. That's the trend it is in North America, keeping up with the Joneses. It's not unusual to play for 3 different coaches in 1 year. So the kids are growing up in an environment that every coach, before he really starts pressing and coaching the kid in the direction where he needs to evolve, every coach tries to get the kid's trust, develop the relationship. There's always a little bit of a period of time where every coach, that's our natural behavior, we try to get the kid so he gets our trust, and then we start pressing his buttons, and hopefully he'll get better the way we want, so he is better for himself and for the team. In youth, we're together need to remind ourselves that kids, if I'm a parent, they need to play for the same coach more than short period of time. Because there's always the next guy, and it's always exciting for the kids to play for somebody new because the new person is not picking on him right away. Well, I guarantee you that after 3 years of the kids doing the same bad mistakes over and over and over, now there's going to be some friction in the relationship between the coach and the kid. And kids need to learn how to keep earning the coach's trust. That's very important. And we, when Nick Lidstrom was obviously captain of the Detroit Red Wings, the first ever Stanley Cup captain coming out of Europe, and he took the torch from Steve Yzerman, called him a super sweet. The reason why none of these factors affected his performance. In today's hockey, a lot of guys get affected by not being able to handle a routine, not being able to handle chronic pain, fatigue. They hit progress wall. They don't know just how to get better, how to reinvent themselves. When I talk about reinventing the culture of the Detroit Red Wings, how do you get better, reinvent, and not being liked? You don't like me, I can't play for you. Well, it needs to change. I need to earn your trust. I gotta make myself to be as good that you have no other choice than to like me. And that's the mentality that every player needs to have. Thank you very much.